Hi, welcome to Business Influencers. I'm your host, Chris Salem. Hope everybody is having a great week, and we are excited that you found us here at the TALRadio platform. If you are new here, we hope that you are now experiencing a lot of the different content that we have here at TALRadio across many different areas of interest that you may have, both on a business level, personal level, professional level, you name it, you can find it here. We've been with Business Influencers, or with TALRadio, for over 4 years. So again, we want to thank those listeners that have been with us from day one. We are committed to your success each and every week, helping to raise your level of influence to the next level. Today's show is being brought to you today by Alumni Direct. Alumni Direct is a social media community platform dedicated to bringing alumni together from all different generational types and an opportunity to meet new people for the first time. Now, it is a membership program, taking out all the noise out of social media. You get to generate genuine and authentic relationships with the people you choose to interact with. If you'd like some more information about Alumni Direct, check them out at alumnidirect.com. That's alumnidirect.com. Well, we got a great episode here for you today. We're going to be talking about EI, emotional intelligence for the unscripted moments in real life. The conversation is going to explore the gap between understanding EI intellectually and actually practicing it in real-time moments. Now, this is going to be something that I feel that, you're not going to only want to hear once, but go back and listen it again and share it with other people that you may feel that can benefit from it, because I'm a big supporter of EQ. And we're going to be here with Sylvia Baffour. And before I bring her on, I'll give you a little background. For more than 3 decades ago, in a Zimbabwean boarding school, a difficult conversation with her dorm mates changed the trajectory of her life. At 14, she learned that impact matters just as much as intent. They told her that I made them feel small, and that moment marked a lifelong commitment, how understanding our emotions, words, and behaviors affect others. That experience she had became the foundation of her work in emotional intelligence, and what began as a personal self-awareness evolved into a professional mission focused on how leaders recognize, regulate, and use emotions wisely, especially when pressure is high. Today, her work centers on what she calls street EI, that's trademarked. This is emotional intelligence that shows up in real moments, not just in theory. It lives in conversations, decisions, and leadership interactions that shape trust, culture, and performance. Street EI is practical, human, and grounded in the realities leaders face every day, and it's at the heart of her work that she guides each and every person that she comes in contact with to help them become more intentional and create more impact in the areas that they serve. And without further ado, we welcome Sylvia Baffour to our digital platform stage. So Sylvia, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the hearty introduction. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a big proponent of emotional intelligence. I think it is the foundation of just about anything that is important in our personal lives, from our families to communities to business. I guess let's start a little bit about your personal journey, where it started and what led you up to where you are today and what you're going to share with us around this topic.
Yeah, well, I got certified as a life coach about 24 or so years ago, back long time ago, before it was a pretty regulated industry. And, my obsession was really helping people navigate challenges that they face. And I often did it with friends over a glass of wine at a bar or something, right? With a bar napkin, writing things down for them. So I built a life coaching practice for a couple of years and got into professional speaking. And in the last decade or so, my interest in emotional intelligence really grew. And I got to the realization you mentioned, Chris, in your introduction, the boarding school, so we're talking about more than 3 decades ago. I had an incident that happened to me where my dorm mates blindsided me and told me I was a horrible human being, and I really made people feel small. And it was shocking to me because I didn't think that's the way I was moving through the world. And I had to come to a point of realizing that the gap between my intentions and my impact matters, right? And it can cost me relationships and trust and influence, which I think, a lot of leaders connect with in terms of what's important in leadership. And so, I've been, speaking professionally in that realm. I wrote a book in 2019 called I Dare You to Care, and it was largely anecdotal, just capturing stories of people misusing emotional intelligence or using it well in their lives. So that's kind of what's brought me to this moment. I'm obsessed with the practical side of emotional intelligence, not really keeping it in the head, clinical, and so heavy in the data.
I think that's so important, Sylvia, because a lot of times things can sound really good, but in real life, if someone's not able to really align it to real life situations, the chances of it even people doing it and then sticking are probably going to be very low. So I think it's so important what you're doing, and I think this is so critical, especially in business. When we think about emotional intelligence, is it something that we have to we obviously got to understand our own emotions if we're going to be able to understand other people, but where does it start?
Yeah, I think it starts with one, I think recognizing that you can be a better human being, right? In the next moment that's presented to you in your life. And I think it starts by being in tune with what you're feeling, right? And then having the tools and strategies to help you influence the moment, right? Because we all know we're not responsible for what we feel, but we're responsible for what we do with how we feel. And so you're absolutely right, Chris, that the fundamental places we begin by identifying, am I angry? Am I frustrated? I often find that we mislabel things, right? You may be exasperated and you're saying I'm peeved, right? And you're not really meeting the moment in describing how you're feeling. So whatever you end up doing about it might not be the best course of action. And I think for me, when I think about Street EI and the reason why it matters so much, I hope I'm not jumping the gun in terms of questions you might be thinking of. Oh. But a lot of the keynotes I've done, a lot of the leaders I speak to will say, Sylvia, we love the fact that we didn't feel like we could just go and Google all the information you just shared, because it was practical. It showed us how I can use it tomorrow in my own life when I wake up in the morning. And if it's, like you said, if it's not accessible, if we can't practice it, what use is it, right? It's no good to know what's happening in your amygdala and your hippocampus and your prefrontal cortex if when you get triggered by your neighbor's dog, you're acting out. Like, what use is it to know what was happening in your brain? So I think for me, it's an obsession with creating a movement of Street EI ambassadors, people who understand how to use it every day in the streets of their lives and recognize the moment. When I wrote my book, I was actually interviewing. I drove Lyft for 18 months and interviewed unsuspecting passengers for the book, and just got human stories of how people were using it every day.
Wow, that's fabulous. Love it. And it's one of those things. I mean, I practice emotional intelligence on a daily basis. A lot of times, it's about, we're human, of course, but it's the ability to really focus on what we can control versus what we can't. And then, knowing how to respond to other people in situations and not react to them, and usually it's very easy to react, especially if you're angry or you're operating from a negative emotion. What do you feel like with Street EI, like what it can do, that when people can really understand it, like how to use it in real situations, how it can transform a situation, how it can turn a difficult situation into not so difficult, or maybe change the outlook on it, or even dealing with difficult people, or if they're in a difficult relationship type of thing?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most fundamental, and I think about this example because a lot of leaders I've talked to have found it impressionable. So I call them Street EI moves. If you're thinking about moving through the streets of your life with Street EI moves, when we're faced with difficult situations or conflict or stuff that's sort of rattling us emotionally, if we can focus on what I call the emotional aftertaste of the interaction, right? This means, Chris, even before I got into this conversation with you, believe it or not, I thought about the emotional aftertaste I wanted to leave behind, right? In the heart and mind of your listeners, in your heart and mind. And so the thing that leaders can latch onto is thinking about one emotion that they'd ideally like someone to feel by the time they're done interacting with them. No guarantee we can't control how people feel about us, for sure. We can't control, it's not our jobs to control it, but absolutely as leaders, we can influence how we leave people feeling. One of the most dominant ways I found to do that in shaping that experience is to think of one emotion. If I want you to feel anxious by the time we're done with this conversation, my body language, my choice of words, my tone of voice is all going to be geared towards leaving you, as much as I can control, you feeling anxious. If I want you to feel inspired, even after a difficult performance evaluation, it's absolutely going to influence my choice of words, my body language, my tone of voice. And oftentimes when I leave a keynote and a year later, I have leaders coming up to me and saying, I still remember the importance of influencing the emotional aftertaste, because that guides us, right? It's the thing you talk about things you can control. I can control as much as possible how I leave you feeling. Now, and then the day, it's not 100% guaranteed, but if I care, if I think, I wanted Chris to feel inspired by the time I'm done talking to him, everything about the way I approach the interaction is going to be geared towards eliciting that feeling out of you. And oftentimes that will quell down, you arguing with your spouse or your neighbor or whatever the case is, your kids, right? If you think about the emotional aftertaste, absolutely, it has you work backwards to say, if I want them to have a sweet emotional aftertaste, I've got to be more mindful of the way I'm moving through this moment with them,
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I love this. And this is so important. And, right now, let's say, for instance, we have people that listen to the show that are, entrepreneurs, they're business leaders working in companies. And, do you feel like, it's how I look at it. I'm sure you do too, but I wanted to hear from your perspective. How EQ, if utilized on a day-to-day basis, like, seeing it as a strategy, how it can really impact our engagement in the workplace, how it can really really elevate team performance, how it can offset some of the issues that are in the workplace from retention issues, burnout, and then how this reflects in creating better experiences for our customers, all of the above. I'm just now spinning it more to business right now. And a lot of people would just go, yeah, it sounds nice, but because they see it as a soft skill or something like that, not something that is really strategic. Love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the perfect word, Chris, strategic. There's nothing soft about it because, we all know the old adage, people do business with people they like and trust, right? And how do we get people to like and trust us if they'd rather escape our presence? So if as a business person, you do not care about how you're being experienced, you're absolutely going to make yourself have a difficult journey ahead, right? And so I think about, no matter whether it's, organizations are made up of teams are made up of individuals. And as leaders, if you do not meet, I think about leaders who think, well, I have one style of leadership, take it or leave it. Maybe you're tough as nails. I tell it like it is.
You're very direct, yeah.
Absolutely, very direct, right? But you have people on your team who wear their emotions on their sleeve. Now, as a leader, if you think about it as kowtowing and sort of having to bow down and grovel to those people who are a bit more sensitive, if you see your job as that, you're going to create the worst kind of toxic environment. And I think it's upon us leaders to see that we exist in relation to one another. We cannot foster and fuel business if we aren't mastering the art of interacting with other human beings. And Chris, I once heard a definition of EQ, EI that I think was so easy to remember. And it's this idea that it's all about your ability to interact effectively with other humans. That is it in a nutshell. Emotional intelligence is simply our ability to interact effectively with other humans. We cannot build businesses, get to billions of dollars, have happy customers if we are not interacting effectively. Now, guess what? There's all this behind the scenes work we have to do in order to, you think about the leader who's able to reach the person who's like, boss, tell me like it is. I'll take it. I don't have my emotions on my sleeve. To the leader who can work around his team with the spectrum of human beings and their little needs, especially in these young generations we're now seeing that are coming up with different sort of mindsets. The leader who can manage how they interact with all those people is the effective leader who is fueling and fostering a company that's making money, that's thriving, that has happy customers. And so anyone who says, oh, that's a soft skill, we're not, this is not military camp. Like, we're not just, you cannot build thriving businesses in the 21st century. We might as well just become robots if that's the case, right? You're still going to need to be a good human who is leading other humans,
Absolutely. You got to, like you said, you got to adapt. A lot of people just say older generations just assume that, well, these young kids, they're lazy. They don't do what we used to do. And you talk to them, it goes one ear and out the other. Well, and I can understand that because I'm from the older generation. I'm an old Gen X, and I can relate to that. But also because of EQ, I can be now aware that they're a product of their own generation. Again, they don't communicate the same way. And their attention to detail is a lot less. Not because they don't care, it is what it is. It's just a product of the times and the environment and the distractions around us and how they grew up. So I don't want to use that as an excuse, but emotional intelligence to me is about adapting. We have to be able to adapt, not conform, but knowing that we can't always look at it for what we think it should be. We have to look at it for what it is and find what's best, whoever's involved to move it forward. I that's at least what I get and what I'm hearing, what I'm picking up when I'm listening what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's the point, Chris. I was doing a keynote the other day and I had to talk about the generations. And I said to it was this American Businesswomen Association, I said, I could come here and give you a generational playbook on how you should deal with baby boomers and Gen X's and millennials and all. I said, how exhausting is it to have this playbook in your head? You're walking around life trying to remember how you should interact with a boomer versus we're not monolithic, right? And so for me, the simple strategy is ETH, engage the human, even the ones who you think don't care. When human beings feel seen and valued, they will open up their world to you. They will hear you more. They will adjust to how you need things to be done as long as they felt seen, agreed with, right? But just felt seen. So I absolutely agree with you on that. Yeah.
I love it. Love it. And, I want to just let everybody know, that if you have a business, you're running a business or you're running a team, how important this is. And we want to make sure that you do get in contact with Sylvia here later when she provides her contact information. Sylvia, what would be some other things with the Street EI or anything around the title that we're talking about today that you feel the audience should really understand about EI and why, and again, why this is something else they should be implementing, not only on a personal level, but a professional level as well?
I think we're all working and interacting with other people. The world is getting smaller. I think the ability to master the art of being the kind of person who allows people to feel seen, even when you don't agree with them, right? I think one of the things I'd love for people to know is dispel this myth that empathy, which of course is the heart of emotional intelligence, right? That empathy is about being nice and it's about agreeing with people. And leaders, I've had leaders tell me, Sylvia, I don't want to show too much empathy to my people because I feel like they may take advantage of my generosity. If I ask you how you're feeling, then I have to do something about the answer that comes across my ears, right? And I think it's so important to think that empathy, which we need now more than ever, as you know, the world is so divided and we need it now more than ever. And it's not about agreeing with people. In fact, if I can just share something that never left my mind because it was so profound, Brene Brown, that many of your listeners may have heard of before, she said, we need to dispel the myth that empathy is walking in someone else's shoes. Rather than walking in your shoes, I need to learn how to listen to the story you tell about what it is like in your shoes and believe you even if it doesn't match my own experiences. So that's, for anyone in business, in leadership, right? We're interacting with people who we don't understand, who came from different parts of the world, different backgrounds. I've lived in 7 countries, right? And it's the ability to say, hey, can I allow you to feel seen and valued, even if I disagree with everything you have said? And so that is empathy. It's not about being nice. I think niceness is overrated. We want to be kind, right? Sometimes the kindest thing is the harsh thing to hear, but it's said graciously, and so that's a big thing I want people to think about is we can all be more empathetic. And it doesn't mean we're cowering to other people's views and perspectives. It just means I'm making space for you to feel valued. That's it. If we walk away disagreeing, but I felt my humanity in your presence, we're golden, right?
Oh, I agree. And like you said, empathy, it's not like sympathy. Sympathy feels like, oh, they're down on their luck. I'll have to fix it for them. And all you do is create them to make them dependent on you, and you can't make decisions. They're stuck and stagnant still. So there's a difference. Empathy encourages, it empowers. Hey, here's a resource that could maybe potentially help you. So now they got to do something about it, but you have empowered them to do for themselves. I think that, sometimes people get empathy confused with sympathy. There's a big difference with that. Yeah. Love that. Wow, this is powerful. And if you can, anything else that you could share to connect the dots, whether if it's like, maybe, is there a certain steps to get started? Like, for those that are either, just getting started or maybe know a little bit about EI, but yet just haven't connected the dots.
Yeah, one of the things, Chris, I always invite folks to think about is increasing our self-awareness, but not the kind we're thinking of, right? Because as you know, Chris, from the work you do, self-awareness is broken up into internal and external. I think the majority of us can start by enhancing our external self-awareness, which must come from the outside, right? So if you have a chance to create a survey monkey or a Google Doc where you can anonymize a 5-question survey, you send it out to 5 to 10 people in your world who are rooting for your rise. So no one who's like, they want to see you fall, right? and just ask them some basic questions. When I get stressed out, how do you experience me? Do you think of me, just thinking about some questions you can ask that would illuminate how people experience you, and then just get a chance anonymously to read what your circle of influence is saying about the way they experience you. I think the biggest mark of success for all of us as human beings, not just leaders, is to get to the end of our lives and have people say that, I really enjoyed being around this human. I have a saying often that in your interactions with others, do people crave your presence or do they crave your absence? And to be able to get to the end of your life and look back and hear through the eulogies that you were somebody that people crave to be around, all the doors open in business, personal life, right? And so start with some external self-awareness. I think most of us will be shocked at how we're experienced. We think we're being experienced one way and we're actually being experienced very differently. And I think that's a very big foundational start. The second thing I would say quickly is that, so much uncertainty is facing us globally, right? Even in this country, we don't know from day to day what is happening. And so what I encourage you to think about is embracing what I call gateway questions versus barricading questions. Because most of us, as we go through uncertainty, it's human nature to default to asking, why is this happening? Why are our systems changing? I call those barricading questions. They begin with the word why. Why? Gateway questions, as the name implies, open up the gates to forward thinking. And those questions typically will begin with how or what, right? Instead of why are systems changing, it's what is one thing this new system can do in helping me do my job better? So when you move through a world of uncertainty, asking gateway questions, how and what questions are going to empower you no matter what you're facing in life. So those are two important things I think I would leave your listeners with.
Just amazing stuff that you shared, Sylvia. Thank you so much for this information. I wish we had another half an hour to talk about this, and we definitely will have you on back for a future show to either have a round two with this or a slightly different angle on EI that we could apply it to, because there's so many things else I want to talk about. I want to make sure that the audience has an opportunity to get to know you better by reaching out to you. Before we do so, we want to personally thank you for taking the time to be here today, not only for myself, but my team here at TALRadio, as well as the executives here at the Touch of Life Foundation. We want to thank you for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for the privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. And so let us know, how can the listeners get in contact with you? What are you up to, and anything that you'd like to share or provide them?
Yeah, I'm accessible. LinkedIn is probably a very easy way to find me. Sylvia Baffour, search for me, you'll find me. I love to engage. I have a newsletter that comes out twice a month, and it's basic, short and sweet, street EI tools, street EI strategies. I'm also launching a 30 episode series on YouTube, but that's not quite launched yet. And Instagram, look for me, Sylvia Speaks on Instagram. I'd love to, that's where you get to see me with dogs and wine and some of my great culinary dishes and stuff like that. So yeah, the 360-degree look at your life. I love it. Great. There you go.
Well, we highly encourage everyone to connect with Sylvia across those platforms. All of those links and contact information will be in the show notes across all the different areas. You can access the show on YouTube, TALRadio.org, Spotify, and also Apple. So listeners, we want to thank you again for joining us. We'll be back next week at the same time with another subject matter expert sharing their words of wisdom and insights to help elevate you and your business to the next level through the power of influence. Till then, everybody, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next week. Take care.